Hello, bonjour, and welcome everyone. My name is Paul Keefe, Business Advisor here at the World Trade Center in Winnipeg. I would like to begin today's webinar with our land acknowledgements. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the lands of Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Innu, Denisovan, and Dakota Oyat nations. We acknowledge we are also on the homelands of the Red River Métis, and that northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. The World Trade Center Winnipeg team respects the treaties that were made on these territories and acknowledges the harms and mistakes of the past and present throughout our nation. Thank you for joining our webinar, What Small Businesses Need to Know About the Competition Bureau, which will be presented by Majid Charania. Before we begin, I want to share a few housekeeping items. Please send all of your webinar questions directly to the chat box, or you may unmute yourself, and Majid will try to answer as many questions as he can during the session, as well as a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Second, for all logistical questions, please send them directly to the chat box, and I will answer your questions as quick as I can. Lastly, you will also receive a PDF copy and recording of this presentation within the next week. And now it's time to start our webinar. I would like to introduce you to Majid. Majid is the Director of Compliance and Outreach at the Competition Bureau and has held various roles within the office since 2015. He has private and public sector Canadian international experience in competition law and policy, compliance, and sales and marketing. Welcome, Majid. The floor is all yours.
Great, thank you very much, and I really appreciate the World Trade Center for having me and hosting the Competition Bureau. So I really hope this session is useful for the small business owners and managers on the line. So what I hope to do is not necessarily make competition law experts out of everyone, but to give you at least a basic understanding of the Competition Bureau, what it is that we do, of competition law and what you need to know about, and then where to go to find more information and how to share information with us. So before getting right into it, I do have to present just a standard disclaimer. So views are my own. The answers and opinions that I provide during the session, they're mine, and they don't sort of predetermine any enforcement approach or position by the Commissioner of Competition or any other federal agency. So with that out of the way, what I propose to do over the next little while is kind of start at a 50,000-foot level and explain sort of why competition is important and why there are laws and rules around it, and then kind of dive in a little bit more to the role of the Bureau and what the competition ecosystem is in Canada, and help you understand kind of the lay of the land. And then from there, I'll talk a little bit about the areas of the law that we enforce, and also how we promote competition. Those are relevant for you because then you can understand A, how to protect your business, but B, also how to share information with us and kind of help us help you. So that's kind of the order for things today. So really starting kind of at the highest level, like why is competition important in a business context? And put simply, capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's just exploitation. So competition is a really important force to make the free market economy in Canada work the way it should and actually deliver the benefits to Canadian citizens, to small business owners, et cetera, of having an open market economy. So that's kind of the idea behind it. But baked into that is also the fact that there need to be guardrails around the economy, because as you can imagine, if you start a business, you want to become big, you want to gain profits and gain market share. And that can ultimately create an incentive once you're big to try to stay big. And that can lead to a whole host of perverse outcomes for the economy. And when it comes to small and medium-sized businesses, actually, it's relevant because having competition that works, a strong competition in the economy, actually gives you a fighting chance to enter into a market and then to scale and compete, basically to participate in the economy. So having strong competition is actually good for small businesses. So talked about, having guardrails. Where are these like restraints on competition? I alluded to one around companies that get big, becoming big, and then doing things to stay big. Uh, that's in our sort of language called an abuse of dominance or abusing their market power. That's just one example, but restraints on competition can really come from two places. One is private sector action, things like big companies behaving badly, or collusion between companies, or the outcomes even of companies merging on the market. That's kind of all the private side. That's business conduct, business actions. But also government action can have an impact on competition, what we call public restraints on competition. And so these are things like regulations that might have a legitimate purpose, like health and safety, but could also make it harder, for instance, for a small business to enter into a market and to compete because of the weight of the rule.
Majid, sorry, I think you're muted there. Still muted. Not sure what happened. 1 second. Huh. I can't unmute you or not.
Yeah, I can't either for some reason.
Very odd.
How about
Oh.
now?
Oh,
Yeah, you're
yes,
back.
it's working.
Okay. Where did you lose me?
I was focused on trying to get you unmuted. I would just restart from the beginning of the slide.
Of this slide. Sure. So what I was saying before in relation to kind of the key restraints on competition, businesses and their actions can lead to restraints, but also government action in the form of rules and regulations can also act as a restraint on vigorous competition. So we, at the Bureau, we look at both of these things. So you might be sort of saying, okay, well, this is all good kind of at a macro level, but what does the law actually have to do with me? I mentioned one thing, it ensures a level playing field for small and medium-sized businesses, and that's actually baked into Canada's competition law as one of the purposes of the law, to ensure that small and medium-sized businesses have an equitable chance to participate in the Canadian economy. There's often a misconception that competition law, folks kind of know about it or hear stuff in the news, really only applies to big businesses, and small businesses don't really need to worry about it. But that's not actually true. The law applies to all businesses, doesn't matter how big or small. Doesn't matter what sector you're in, what type of sort of selling process you have. It applies to everyone. So we all know that ignorance of the law is not a defense to anything, and that's kind of why it's important to know about competition law. Knowing about it helps you protect your business and comply with the law. Knowing about it can also help you spot anti-competitive conduct by others in the market, your competitors, etc. And they might be having an impact on your business, on your ability to enter a market and scale. So knowing the law can also help you determine, well, what are my options? Maybe I share information with the Bureau about what I'm seeing, or take advantage of other options to try to ensure that you can benefit from a competitive marketplace. So earlier on, I mentioned sort of the competition ecosystem, and with that background in mind about why competition matters and what it has to do with small businesses, I wanted to spend a moment to give you the lay of the land of what Canada's competition ecosystem looks like. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got the Competition Bureau, the lawyers, and the courts. I'm going to make a Law and Order analogy, which works well in a room because I can ask how many people have heard of Law and Order. I'm just going to hope and pray that everyone on the line or enough of you know the show, but basically the Competition Bureau is like the first half hour of Law and Order. We're the agency that goes and investigates, doing things like interviewing witnesses, gathering the facts to basically determine what happened, whether the law has been broken or not. So we're the investigators. But we have to take our cases to court if we do find that the evidence shows there might have been a breach of the law. So for that purpose, we've got lawyers. Because the Bureau has a criminal enforcement mandate and a civil enforcement mandate, there's sort of two tracks there. Depending on the type of case, we might have federal Department of Justice lawyers litigate on our behalf. They would go to a specialized civil tribunal called the Competition Tribunal. In other cases, when there's a criminal matter at play, we have to hand off our case to the Public Prosecution Service of Canada. They're independent federal prosecutors. They're sort of the second half hour of law and order, and they would take our criminal cases through the ordinary court system. On the other side of the screen, you've kind of got the policy and civil society ecosystem, and it's actually been very important recently because Canada's competition law has changed over the last couple of years. There's a fair number of important changes that all businesses should know about. By and large, things like penalties increasing, the scope of the law kind of growing in different ways. All of that means that businesses need to be more aware now than ever of what competition law is and make sure that they're complying with it. The other side of that, and it's sort of captured in the civil society aspect, is that you're also a really important voice. You have perspectives that we would want to hear about, whether it's as simple as saying, I'm seeing what looks like anti-competitive behavior in my market. Can you take a look at that? All the way to, these government rules and regulations, they're making it hard for me to compete. These are all things that we would want to hear about, so you bring a really valuable perspective. I am sure that most, if not all of you, are really busy kind of trying to run your business. So it's also a good idea to maybe take advantage of the business support organizations in your area, in your ecosystem, like the World Trade Center or the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce, to bring your issues and pain points to us and advocate to us as well. So we're really open to hearing a diverse range of perspectives. So that's kind of lay of the land. I'll pause there to see if there are any questions. If not, I'll dive a little bit more into what it is that we do.
No questions in the chat, but if anyone has any off the top of their head and you want to come off mute, that's totally fine. You can use a raise hand feature, but if not, we can keep rolling there, Majid.
Okay. So for those who have actually heard of the Bureau, maybe in the news or elsewhere, I want to spend a minute just to explain a little bit of what we do and what we don't do to give you a flavor of our role. Sometimes, things can be misconstrued or there isn't, complete information out there. So I want to make sure that the record is straight on what it is that we do. I think one of the key points is that our role is to protect and promote the competitive process in markets. So we're not out there to pick winners and losers. We're not the ones who can take an action to protect or do something on behalf of one specific business against another. So we don't protect individual competitors. We don't intervene, directly in commercial disputes. We're also not a price regulator. So we don't decide, what the right price is for a given product or service. Our role is really to make sure the competitive process is working, that there's no restraints or barriers on it, either by business action or by public action that's distorting competition. So that's kind of the core of our role. Because we're, as I said, we have to investigate and then our cases then go to court. We're not a decision maker. And that's important to know because sometimes in the news, you might see headlines about, the Bureau levying a fine against someone or what have you, but we don't make a call as to what is illegal or not. That's up to a judge, which also means that we can't give kind of individualized advice to businesses about what it is that they're doing. So we don't give that type of advice, but we do have a lot of informational resources, which I'll leave you at the end, to help you understand what the law is and what your options are and how best to protect yourself. So we've got those free resources. They're all in plain language and they're meant for business owners. So I've said the words protect and promote competition a fair bit. what do we actually mean by protecting competition? It really falls into four buckets or four major areas of the law that we enforce. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see cartels. We're not talking here about drug cartels. We're really talking about business collusion. So companies in a market coming together to agree on, dimensions of competition rather than competing on the merits of their products or services. So these are things like price fixing. These are things like rigging bids for procurement contracts, or as of last year, agreeing with other employers to fix wages or terms of employment, what's called kind of wage fixing and no poaching agreements. These are all caught by the law. These can all be criminal conduct in nature, so the penalties are quite severe. And I think an example that a number of people are probably aware of is the case that's ongoing related to bread price fixing that involved Loblaws and Canada Bread and a number of other companies. So that's kind of an example of a price fixing case. On the deceptive marketing side, this is just like cartels, really relevant for all businesses. You have a positive obligation to not mislead the public through, the information you provide in marketing or in social media, etc. So we enforce rules related to deceptive marketing. A good recent example is our recent win against Cineplex for drip pricing, where they were adding mandatory fees to the cost of a ticket that was bought online. You couldn't get out of it, but they weren't advertising the price of the ticket with that fee up front, so they weren't being fully transparent. So that's a recent case of deceptive marketing. On the other side, we've got areas of the law where I think for small businesses, the key message is if you know the law, you can be vigilant, because some of these types of things could actually impact you and your ability to enter and scale in a market. So monopolistic practices, big term, but really what it means is big firms behaving badly. So big firms kind of throwing around their market power and doing so in a way that could harm competition. The example there is an ongoing investigation into Google, but we have a number of cases in this area where small businesses have actually benefited arguably from the outcome. There was a case, for example, against the Toronto Real Estate Board. They created rules that effectively made it so that small businesses with new models on how to provide information to buyers and sellers of real estate couldn't get data out of the MLS system. We took them to court. We ultimately won. And once the decision came through and the Toronto Real Estate Board changed their practices, we actually saw new companies, innovators coming into the market. So this is, like I said, an area where if you know the law, you can share information with us about potentially abusive practices. And then finally, we are the agency that reviews mergers in Canada. And so we do that to determine whether a merger between companies could harm competition, and we have the power to challenge a deal before the courts to try to stop it or get a remedy to actually protect and preserve competition. The Rogers and Shaw case is an example. Unfortunately, the courts did not agree with our position and let the deal through, but I think that's a pretty common example. I mentioned a few sort of big names, big companies. I think one message, though, is that, as I said before, you can get the sense that the law really only applies and we only enforce it in relation to big businesses, but that's not actually true. We actually have quite a lot of investigations related to smaller and medium-sized businesses. And I want to just quickly share an example of an ongoing case in Manitoba that does involve small and medium-sized businesses. It kind of illustrates the risks that are out there and a reason why businesses should protect themselves. So this is a case in Brandon, Manitoba, where 5 contractors, we allege, it's an ongoing case, but we believe entered into a conspiracy to rig bids for at least 89 social housing renovation contracts. And the contracts were valued at a total of $4.5 million. So as you can see, like we're not always going after just big dollar value issues. $4.5 million divided amongst 89 contracts is a lot of very small contracts, but that's still relevant. It's still a breach of the law in our view. Case is ongoing. But individuals have been charged, and the possible penalties can be quite severe. So this is sort of a local example, and I think it's a good showcase of why small businesses need to know about the Act. I've spent now a lot of time talking about how we protect competition. So all of that really related to business action. So businesses doing things that could be offside. Our promotion mandate is around addressing those government actions, the public restraints that I mentioned earlier, to try to make sure that when governments are regulating or making policy, they're doing so in the most pro-competitive way possible. So I think you all probably know and sometimes feel, the fact that a lot of markets in Canada, a lot of business activity is regulated. And so the government can affect the rules of the game. And they might have very good reasons to do that. It could be to achieve a health and safety objective or a security objective, and that's all very legitimate. But if those same rules distort competition or impose an excessive burden on smaller businesses trying to enter a market, it can actually dampen competitive intensity. So we try to bring a competition perspective or lens to different levels of government, federal, municipal, provincial, on kind of any government action that could impact competition. So you'll see a number of examples at the bottom of the screen. We can do market studies. We're currently doing one related to the airline industry. We finished one last year related to groceries. All the way down to writing letters to ministers, open letters related to things like liquor retailing or digital, sort of strategies, things like that. So these are all examples of the work that we do to promote competition. But to do this work better, we need to hear from a diverse range of players. So I mentioned earlier, your voice is really important. Hearing from small businesses about pain points is how we can pinpoint issues that we may want to advocate on. We may want to promote at any level of government. So I would encourage you to think about that in terms of your businesses. And if there are pain points, highlight them to us. We're always happy to listen, and that contact information, I'll provide it towards the end of the presentation. So that sort of covers the what we do part at a very high level. I've also talked a little bit about protecting yourselves. Having a compliance program is probably the best way to protect your business from getting into a gray zone or ending up in a situation where you're embroiled in an investigation and are exposed to risk. So at a very simple level, a compliance program is basically a set of business practices to help you minimize the risk or eliminate the risk of misconduct within your business, and also to detect early any potential risky activity. So some people, might think of compliance and say, oh, well, banks and airlines and insurance companies have compliance programs. I don't have the money to hire a whole team and do all of the stuff. And that is fair, but we're also very cognizant of that fact. No two compliance programs will look the same because each business is different. So a small business can definitely have a program, but it can be simple. It can be scaled to the business's size and also to the resources that you have available. We look at each compliance program if it comes to us in the context of a case. We look at it on a case-by-case basis, and we will take into account all of these factors. So compliance program, way to protect yourself. It's essentially a set of business practices. How can it actually help you? So it can help you obviously understand your risks. It can help you understand the law, and it's a way by which you could train your employees. And it can bring a lot of benefits. So aside from reducing the risk that you're involved in an investigation, exposure to lawsuits, all of that kind of stuff. It can also help your business. Increasingly larger companies that you might want to do business with are requiring their vendors to have compliance measures in place. So that can help you do business with bigger companies. Having a compliance program in place also just shows that you're out there doing business the right way and you're trying to be ethical. That's good for your public image. And it can also help your employees kind of focus on what matters by eliminating or reducing the risk of potential investigations and misconduct. You're eliminating distractions for them. And you're also empowering them because if they can spot anti-competitive conduct in the market, your business will be better placed to know your options and to take action. So I'm not going to go into sort of the details on how to implement a compliance program because I'm going to share resources to do it. But this is a bit of a snapshot of how to actually do it. And I would say kind of key elements are the commitment. So, owners, managers really saying, okay, yeah, we're going to do the right thing. And then going and understanding based on your business's operations, where you're exposed to risk, and then saying, okay, what can I do to minimize that exposure? How can I make sure my people are trained up? How can I make sure that they're actually buying into this culture of doing business the right way? And then how can I make sure that as a business, we know what to do, if we're exposed to risk. So a compliance program properly implemented can help you with all of those things. I said I would leave it at sort of a high level. We have a compliance hub on the Competition Bureau's website. It's a one-stop shop that's in plain language, and it's meant for small and medium-sized businesses to go and get kind of the next level of detail. Okay, I get that it's important. Now, what do I really do? You can go to our compliance hub, and we've got the steps or the principles that should be baked into your compliance program in there. We link those up with different areas of the law, as I mentioned before, collusion, deceptive marketing, etc., to sort of bring to life, all right, this is how compliance principles really can help and how they link up to the law itself. All of that is here, so I would really highly encourage you to go take a look. So what do I want to really leave you with? Just a few things. If you take anything away from this presentation, know that the Competition Bureau is there not only to investigate and protect competition, but also to advocate for smarter, more pro-competitive regulation in Canada. More competitive intensity in the market means that you have a better chance of actually starting and scaling. Having protection measures for your business is good because that helps you comply with the law and stay out of hot water. But it also helps you to know when to report misconduct. And actually sharing information is essentially a really good way to help us help you. So I promise contact information. Here it is. You can get in touch with us in a number of different ways. We have what we call an information center where actual human beings will pick up the phone and talk to you. We have a web form that you can use if that's easier for you to share information or file a complaint. And if you scan the QR code, you can get all of that and also more information about the different areas of the law. If something spoke to you, if you had a light bulb moment and you want to learn more, we've got some podcasts that we've done on the different areas of the law. We've got a webinar. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's really easy to access and in plain language for everyone. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm happy to take questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Majid, for the wonderful webinar. I think it's such an overlooked area within business that, kind of one of the first questions I have is just what would you say from a small business perspective are some of like the most overlooked aspects or underrated, aspects in regards to, viewing competition, utilizing Competition Bureau and compliance?
It's a good question. I have to say there's a bit of an awareness issue generally when it comes to competition law and the role of the Bureau, which is why we're really happy to be able to do this for for your audience, because it starts with knowing what your options are and what the law is. I would say that kind of baked into that is the fact that even if some people have seen some news articles or headlines about the Bureau or some cases, it might lead people to think, well, the law doesn't apply to me. I'm a small business. I have a lot of conversations with business owners where that's where they start from. And then kind of hearing, no, there's more to it than that can really set off a light bulb. And so, understanding the fact that the law applies regardless of how big a business is important. And then knowing that, there's some positive obligations. Got to make sure you're not colluding with your competitors or sharing competitively sensitive information. Know that you're marketing, materials. If you're making a performance claim about a product, it's got to be backed up by testing. Those types of do's and don'ts aren't necessarily that well understood. Some of them can be intuitive, but it really takes knowledge of the fact that they're even out there to start. So I think those are some common either pitfalls or gaps. And the good thing is we've got a lot of resources to help business owners address that. And going to our website and going to the links that I provided can help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I'll just remind everyone that we will be sending out the slides here within the next week, so you'll be able to access those and check out the links and the QR codes that Majid shared. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand, come off mute, or drop your question in the chat. Looks like Fiona has a question, so yeah, if you want to come off mute, Fiona, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thanks for the presentation. I enjoyed it. It was interesting. I do have a question. You, in one of your slides, it talked about regulations and governmental regulations, and that could be a potential area that might be worth looking at in terms of if there's too many regulations that it makes competition more difficult for smaller businesses. I'm in healthcare, and we're getting contracts for bids, and I understand why they've done it. They've created these 80 to 100-page contracts that you have to sign if you want to even bid on a site. And it's almost becoming that unless you're a huge multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar company, you can't even participate. So is that something that sort of would be worth us looking into, or is it just the government set their regulations for what they want to meet and we don't really have an option? We just have to deal with what they put forward.
So that's a really good question, and it is a question that I hear often. Unfortunately, we don't really have any control over the way that a specific procurement process is set up, in the sense that we don't have a way of telling them, you got to cut back on the paperwork that you have associated with this process, or you need to simplify, your requirements. But this is the kind of thing where if we hear about it in sectors where there's regulation, and this is part of the sort of regulatory burden, it can help us determine, okay, maybe this is part of a broader issue, for example, that we might want to look at. You mentioned that you're in the healthcare sector, and we've actually done a fair bit of work because health is a heavily regulated sector. We looked most recently at digital healthcare. And if you're interested, on our website, we've got our market study into that sector. I think we published that either in 2023 or 2022, but in the last couple of years, we had a pretty extensive study come out on digital healthcare. So I hope that answers your question. Unfortunately, like I said, we're not the ones to sort of give direction on how to set up processes, but we can factor that kind of stuff in as part of potentially a broader pain point.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome.
And maybe one last thing, sorry, to add on that. When we do our advocacy work, no matter what sector it is or what level of government, our role is limited to providing advice and recommendations. So we can shine a light on an issue and advocate for it, but we don't have the power to direct another part of government to do something a different way. It's more like moral suasion and advocacy. So I just want to set the expectations for that.
Awesome. And Fiona, I did my quick wizardry Google search here and pulled up the digital market study and put in the chat for you. So that's there. We got another question here from Robert. How does MASH government using buying groups for major above thresholds procurements versus public tender factor into competition?
I can't really comment on hypotheticals like that. Whenever we look at it at an issue, we have to gather the facts of that specific issue, and we kind of do our own investigative work. Generally, we do look at public procurement from the lens of bid rigging. That's kind of our angle. And so when I say bid rigging, what that means is collusion between businesses to determine how they're going to bid for a particular call for bids or tenders, and agreeing on those dimensions in secret. So that could be something like, a few competitors getting together. They notice that a municipality is going out for a very regular tender for, I don't know, snow removal services, and it comes every year. If those competitors get together in secret and say, okay, well, you bid low this year, I'll bid low the next year, and then competitor 3, you bid low the following year, we'll just rotate this contract amongst ourselves, create an illusion of competition, but really we've rigged the game. That's bid rigging, and that's illegal, and that's kind of our angle on public procurement. I don't know if that's a helpful answer, but hopefully that gives you a better sense of kind of what our role would be in that area.
Okay, thanks for that. Doesn't look like there's any other questions. I'll let people kind of ponder through for a moment here. As I just quickly mentioned, we have some upcoming webinars and events. On November 19th, we have a workshop developing your AI Copilot strategy presented by Ryan Bialik and Kyle Braun of Clear Concepts. November 20th, our WTC Talks live in-person event with 2 heavyweights tech entrepreneurs here in Winnipeg, Yvonne Boisjoli of Peasy and Chris Schmidt of Parallel, and they'll be at Torque Brewing. December 3rd, Doing Business in Canada, the Manitoba Advantage, presented by EDW and MLT Aikens. And on December 10th, we're doing an overview of Manitoba employment standards. So in the chat, you'll see the links to register, and it's also on our events calendar. But doesn't look like there's been any other questions coming in the chat, Majid. So I think that's everything. Any last words, or is that pretty much it?
No, I think I'll just leave people with the QR code for the last few moments in case you want to scan and take a look at the resources. And like I said, we always want to hear from a broad range of voices. So whether it's, sharing information or filing a complaint about what you're seeing in the market now that you're empowered with some knowledge, or pain points related to regulations in your sector, please do reach out to us. We always want to hear from businesses. So thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. Amazing. And thank you for the information, and for you and the Competition Bureau for doing this. It was a really good webinar and jam-packed with lots of information. So thank you, everyone. We'll wrap it up there today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.